Welcome back to another episode of Sabres vs. the Atlantic, where in this series of episodes that we've been doing, we're putting the Sabres up against their Atlantic Division opponents, going at it head-to-head, comparing some of the lines, storylines, and taking a step back and taking an overall look at how the Sabres stack up against whoever we're comparing them to that week. So, as always, my name is Jonah.
I'm Christian.
I'm JP.
In today's episode, we are focusing on the Montreal Canadiens, who, I'll be honest for a second, my original intent was that we were going to take on the Yzer plan this week, that we were going to go after the Red Wings. I don't think that's appropriate anymore, considering what the Montreal Canadiens just did. In case you've been off of hockey Twitter or just out of the loop, they acquired Patrik Laine from the Columbus Blue Jackets. And obviously, just kind of a weird middle of the summer trade where, we'd been hearing about it. We've been hearing that it was going to happen. But, as we approach the season, even Columbus Blue Jackets GM Don Waddell was saying how maybe Laine would have to play up his value a bit to prove to teams he still had it. But obviously the Canadiens being the ones to sort of take that chance, and another division opponent that potentially got better than the Sabres. So I felt it was the right time to just jump into it right now. They're the hot topic. Laine is obviously going to be a huge storyline for them heading into the season. And it definitely creates an interesting dynamic for the rest of that roster, because even before the Laine trade, they were a team that they really didn't do much this offseason, but they're slowly starting to piece some sort of a core together, and are just kind of looking to continue to build into, at least for this season, at least be a competitive team.
Will another rebuilding team pass the Buffalo Sabres? We will find out.
I saw somebody joking today that perhaps they can join, that Montreal Canadiens can join the Sabres, the Senators, and the Red Wings on the bus of overhyping your off seasons and proclaiming that this is the year you finally take that step, become a playoff team, leapfrog one of the big four in the Atlantic. They're getting close to that level. They're certainly hyped about this trade in ways that are very akin to Ottawa fans, in my opinion.
If we all just put our heads together, we could take down the big four, all right? Us four teams that have been buried at the bottom for too long, we just got to, we got to stop the infighting. We got to stop fighting between each other. We need to come together.
Just having a mid-off.
It's not even a mid-off.
So, with all that out of the way, why don't we get into the Montreal Canadiens? Let's take, I kind of hinted at it, but let's kind of take a look at what they've done this offseason. So, more has been shipped out than they've brought in. Honestly, taking a look at their key additions, they really didn't bring in anything. Obviously, Laine's the big addition, and we're going to talk about him as we get into the storylines and look at their lineups. But other than that, it was really it's Alex Bure-Boulay who's just going to help out their bottom six a little bit. And I threw Demidov in there just because it's the big storyline in Montreal. They are thrilled that he dropped them at 5. Depending on who you talk to, this was the most offensively gifted player in the entire draft, even more so than Macklin Celebrini. They're thrilled. So it's, depending on how much stock you put into his scoring in the KHL, this could be a potential franchise player for them. So, or at least a franchise pillar. So I figured it was worth throwing in there. I don't believe he's able to play with Montreal this season. He's got another year in the KHL with St. Petersburg. But we could very well see him next season. So I thought it was worth throwing him in there. But when taking a look at their departures, it's really just more rough around the edges stuff. Tanner Pearson exits the forward group, same with Colin White. And then you saw a little bit of a makeover on the defensive side of things. Jordan Harris going the other way in the Patrik Laine trade. Jonathan Kovacevic being sent to New Jersey. And Chris Weidman heading to free agency as well, along with Jesse Ulonen. And the Harris and Kovacevic being on the way out, it is interesting because when Montreal fans will be the first ones to tell you that they had this huge surplus of defensemen. I mean, even when we go to look at the lineups for next season, it's still pretty crammed in there, and they had to make space and That's kind of what they did. Kovacevic just kind of clearing room on that right side, and then they used Harris as a nice little trade chip to acquire Line services.
Yeah, I felt like it was for a while. It was like, oh, are they gonna do anything? Like it was like them and the Ducks who just really didn't do anything for a while. And now very late into the offseason, they finally make a move. And I don't know, it seems like kind of a weird timeline to make this kind of move. Like I don't think they're ready for competing now. I mean, they are trying to form their squad, trying to form their core, and then they go out and get Line A. And at full retain too. And they're currently over the cap. So I just thought it was kind of a weird move. And rest of their offseason, very, very boring, very lackluster.
Yeah, the Patrick Laine thing. It was a little out of like there were reports that he was going to be shipped off to Montreal as early as yes,
Hey,
JP.
Roger Hicks was on the case. He was
Everyone
saying
clowned him.
Canadians were one of them.
He did not just say
Everyone
Canadians. He
clowned
didn't
him.
just say Canadians.
Yep.
He said Jordan Harris was going to be in that trade.
So all you doubters,
He knew.
Jonah including, Roger Hicks was on the case.
Yeah, NHL insider Roger Hicks. But yeah, it strikes me as kind of an interesting move for them. It seems like I feel like they had bigger fish to fry elsewhere other than adding a scoring winger that's known for, you know, basically being a Victor Olofsson, just better. I feel like they could have, spent their money. They could have spent their money better elsewhere, but I get it. The free agency market dried up pretty quick, and they had to make a move. You could see by their key additions, if they didn't add him, it would have been just another year of being a cellar dweller. But maybe he brings a little bit of a spark to their lineup. I don't know.
Yeah, I said this before we started recording. They're kind of in that 22, 23 Sabres type mode where they have a lot of pieces. Obviously guys like Caulfield and Suzuki are pretty well established, but we don't exactly know what we don't know what the what the ceiling is for someone like Slavkovsky and what the future holds, for Laine. Can he rebound? Can he kind of steady his career? And even somebody like Alex Newhook, who they took a chance on last offseason, kind of like Laine. What does he look like? How does Kirby Doc come back from his injury? So they're kind of in this weird stage where they don't really know. They have an idea of what the core is going to look like, but they kind of need another season to play out. And we can talk a little bit about those storylines heading into next season.
Yeah, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that Cole Caulfield is definitely the next superstar of this league. Absolutely burying the biscuit left and right. He's just an absolute superstar. Just incredible to watch. One of the most exciting players in the show.
He's the best 50-goal scorer to never score 30. All right, so taking a look at some of the key storylines I had when watching them this season, it starts with Laine. Can he get his career back on track? Now, he didn't really have a bad tenure in Columbus. When you just take a look at his raw numbers, it's just he didn't, these last few seasons, he's just kind of been on and off the ice with mental health issues. But if he can, get back into the groove of things and get back to that early Columbus form where he was kind of starting to transform himself as a player, he wasn't putting up the goal scoring numbers he had been in Winnipeg, but he was developing more as a two-way player. So my bigger question here is, I don't feel like I've seen a lot of people talking about this because Laine going to the Canadiens, it makes a lot of sense for them. Like they're in a stage where they can take this risk. My question is when I'm asking the question, is it a good environment for him? Is it a good market for him? Because this is a guy who, he's dealt with mental health issues. Is the pressure of basically the center of hockey, Montreal, is it going to be somewhere where he can thrive, or are the fans or the media, are they going to be tough on him? Columbus, he was probably more walled off than he would have been in a lot of other franchises. So that's my question. Can Laine, is this the best place where he can get back on track?
I think that's a really valid point. I mean, everybody has their own issues. I don't know what his mental health issues were, but if he was having problems in Columbus, where they basically no media coverage because they were not a good team, then it does raise the questions on how he will be with the Canadians. So it's a very valid question.
I don't know. I think the environment thing and the media thing is pretty. I think that narrative is a little skewed. Because you go anywhere, there's media, there's coverage. I mean, I think it's more of the environment. It's not the media. It's more of the environment because when you're playing in a city like Montreal, who has had such a storied franchise, obviously they're the talk of the town. When you're in Columbus, you're kind of playing second fiddle to Ohio State, ours included. Like I think it would have been better for him to be in a hockey city that has, I guess, as of right now, I hate to say lower expectations, but fans have been beaten down here
It's
so
not
much. It's like
Montreal.
it's
It's
not
completely
Montreal.
different. It's completely different.
There's Montreal, there's Toronto, and then there's the rest of the league. Um, he's gonna have a little bit of a challenge, but I would hope that you know they understand where he's coming from and they don't put too much pressure on him immediately. But it's hard to say that when he has an $8.75 million cap hit.
It could have also been just the losing environment and the really bare bones outlook of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like what do they got to look forward to? At least he's going to a team that is trying to do something and is trying to, develop a core, and they should be at least better than
Hmm.
Columbus.
Well, there
Yeah.
was also the other thing I was going to talk about just in a regular episode of the Sabre Roundtable, where Don Waddell was like on record as stating, like a few days before before the trade happened, how he knows that some stuff went down in the locker room that he knows Line wasn't like, he didn't like it, and I think that's very interesting for a GM to say. Sure, he's new, but to be that open about it. And I think going back to like the Mike Babcock saga, when all that was going down, and Captain Boone Jenner came to the media and said, "No, it's not that bad," yada yada yada, and then we found out like a few days later that no, it was that bad. He was going through phones and stuff. So that locker room, I don't think was the greatest, and I don't think it helped where his head was at. So moving on, my second question for this team is how is Lane Hudson gonna impact things? Now Mike Mathewson had a really great offensive season for them last season, so it's not like Hudson is far from being like on his own island there. But I think if this team has any sort of being above 500, maybe even having playoff aspirations, I'm interested to see how he kind of translates to the NHL. Now, he only played, I believe, 2 games last season. I think he picked up an assist or two in those 2 games. Can he translate what he did in the NCAA to the NHL right away? I do kind of like those types of players. Smaller defensemen who are very, puck handlers who try to activate in the offensive zone. Guys that try to do that at his size, they don't usually translate into superstars, and I think a lot of Montreal fans think he has that franchise potential, and I have my own question marks for that. What's the actual result going to be? How is he going to play next season?
He could
Another
very well
player.
turn into Jacob Bryson 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, Bryson was a good NCAA defenseman. He was no Lane Hudson, but that's kind of my question. Bryson, he's probably, if you were to describe him, he's more of an offensive defenseman, but he doesn't even score points. So it's kind of like he's got that weird build, and obviously given his size, he's never going to be a shutdown defenseman. So Hudson, you kind of have to hope he maximizes his offensive output.
Another undersized Canadians player that Jonah can hate on. It just works out. But I
This
mean, he does get a ton of hype from the Canadians fan base, and they think he's going to be, one of the next top defensemen in the league. And it will be really interesting to see how he impacts the lineup. Don't think he'll be, crazy out of the start. He's probably going to be a very boomer bust player for them to start.
I don't think he'll have as much impact as Canadians fans think he will to start, at least for this season. I do think that the NCAA is one of the easier leagues to make a transition from into the NHL. just because, you're already, when you get out of college, you're 22, 23 already. You've been drafted 4 years prior. So it's a good development path, but um, you're still going to a men's, like from a boys league to a men's league here. And it's going to take some time. And guys like this, guys that immediately make impacts on the blue line offensively, like at an elite level, it's very few and far between. And I don't think Lane Hudson falls into that category. Doesn't mean I don't think he will be a good defenseman in, years to come. But coming out of the gates, I wouldn't set my expectations too high for him. I would probably just, hope he has a good first year. That's it.
He's no Owen Power.
No, he's not.
So my third question is very much it's on a broader scale. How elite is the core of the Canadian? And I don't want to turn this into like a bigger, like, is this rebuild doomed from the start? That's not what this is. My question is, when we're talking about next season, can this core push them to the higher end of the playoff race? And the players I'm really talking about, it's their main pieces. It's Suzuki, it's Caulfield, Kirby Dach, Slavkovsky, any of them. Suzuki had a very good season last year, led the team in points, was nearly a point per game. I think he's a first line center. How elite is he? He's the guy I probably have the least amount of questions for, but can he take another step? Can he maybe push into that 90-point range, or maybe take a big step, insert himself into the Selke race, for example? And we get to Cole Caulfield. So anybody who knows me, I have a very complicated history with this player. But I'm not going to dump on him. My question is he the player that like many will peg him to be? Because I feel like it's sort of agreed upon that he's this elite goal scorer, potential for, franchise winger, and guy's never had 30 goals. And my question is he a first line winger, a potential franchise winger, or is he just a second line winger that can give you 30 to 40 goals, maybe only hits 40 goals once or twice in his career, projects more as like a 30 goal scorer? Now, me personally, I tend to think he probably is better suited on the second line. The numbers speak for themselves. Kirby Dach has been good in his limited stints in Montreal, but he has not been able to stay healthy. So even if he is healthy this season, are there any effects from those lingering injuries? Is he a 2 seed like I think he can be, or is he even a winger? And then we get to Slavkovsky, who had a very positive season last year, very unexpected. He faced a lot of criticism when he went first overall, and even his rookie season. There were a lot of bumps, but last season he had 50 points. He had 20 goals. He had a really positive season. My question is, how much more is there for him? When he was drafted, I think everybody acknowledged it was going to be a project, and if he was going to hit big because the physical tools are insane. What is that ceiling for him? Is he a franchise player, or is he like Caulfield, where he's just better off on the second line, but he's still a good player? So like when I look at this core as a whole, and you can throw Lane Hudson into that group, and even throw Laine, like how high end are these players? Does Montreal do they have a franchise player right now? I think maybe you can throw Suzuki into that group, maybe. But I don't know. They don't have a Rasmus Dahlin. I think everybody can agree that's a franchise player. I don't know if they have one of those yet. And I think if they want to get into the playoffs, somebody has to take that step into being probably a franchise player.
Kind of reminds me of at least their forward core and the questions surrounding them, that they might have a lot of really good players, but do they really have that top elite, one of the best players in the league? Kind of reminds me of how, the Sabres forward conversation's been, somewhat recently. We have a lot of really good players, but do we have a top player? Do we have, we always talk about we need that one more top 6 addition, that one top line addition. And I feel like that's what they sort of need in this core. I think they have some really good pieces. They got some diverse skill sets, especially with Slavkovsky. He could be one of the best power forwards in the league. So I think they have they have a good I can't find the word.
Well, I think this goes back to what I was saying about them kind of being the 22-23 Sabres. It's not that I doubt any of those players can be one. It's just I don't know. Like 2 seasons ago for the Sabres, like Tage Thompson, he was coming off a 38-goal season. Did anybody expect him to have 94 points the next year? No. Even Alex Tuck, he was nearly point per game the following season. I don't think he'd ever broke 60 before then. So you're kind of in that same crop. Like Quinn, Peterka, Power, how are they going to translate? It's kind of the same thing with like Elaine Hudson. So that's kind of where I'm at with this core. Like, how good are they?
I'm honestly surprised you even added Cole Caulfield to this list, knowing your hatred for him.
Hey, they're paying him like he's a core player, so I have to throw him in.
I think that if I'm being honest, now that they added Line A, I think this is a more exciting top six than the Sabres' top six is.
I think that's completely valid. I can't disagree with that, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's better, but it is more exciting on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we take a look at their lineup? All right, so once again, here are the projected lineups for each team. This is according to the Daily Faceoff. I'll run over the Sabres lineup very quickly so that everybody, if you're just listening, here's what it is. Top line, J.J. Peterka, Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck. Second line, Jason Zucker, Dylan Cousins, Jack Quinn. Third line, Greenway, McLeod, Benson. Fourth line, Malenstein, Lafferty, Aubé-Kubel. On the defensive side of things, Bowen Byram is with Rasmus Dahlin. Power is with Yoki Haru. Samuelson is with Clifton. And then your two goaltenders are Luukkonen and Levi. And your extras, Krebs, Bryson, and James Reimer. Taking a look at the Canadiens, your top line is Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield. Your second line is Kirby Dach, Alex Newhook, Patrick Laine. Third line, Josh Roy, Christian Dvorak, Josh Anderson. And your fourth line is Yoel Armia, Jake Evans, Brendan Gallagher. On defense, you got Matheson with Goulet, Lane Hudson with David Savard, Arbor Jekai with Barron, and your two goaltenders are Sam Montembeau and Caden Primo. And their extras, Pizzetta, Barry Boulay, and Struble. So taking a look at these two lineups, we can touch on that comment that Christian made. Like, yeah, if you look at the top six, I think it's funny. I think they have the same question mark. Is Newhook top six? Is Alex Newhook top six caliber, and is Jason Zucker top six caliber for the Sabres? I think it's kind of ironic that they, for me at least, that they kind of have that same question. But yeah, if you were to say like, hey, that top six excites me more, I really can't disagree.
It's kind of crazy seeing Brendan Gallagher on the fourth line. How the mighty have fallen. He was a first line guy for how many years?
Yeah, like I said, I want to clarify. This is Daily Faceoff. I have no clue if this is even accurate, and they can throw out some crazy projections sometimes. So, but they did have Gallagher on the fourth.
Yeah, but yeah, when it comes to the top six, I think the Canadiens have the more exciting top six. Just with I don't know. It's just Jason Zucker. He doesn't excite me a ton. And also the idea of having Patrick Laine in your forward group, something that could have boosted my excitement a little bit. But water under the bridge. But when it comes to like the bottom six, I like where the Sabres are at more. And again, it goes back to that identity of having an identity in that bottom six. And it's kind of like the Senators, which we spoke about before. I don't know what the Canadiens are really going for here.
The Sabre, like, even Montreal fans will tell you Josh Anderson is just not it. And I don't think the Sabres really have someone like that in their bottom six. I think Ryan McLeod is better than Christian Dvorak. Jake Evans is a good fourth line center, and Armia has been a good depth player for them. But I think it's close-ish. I would agree that I do think the Sabres kind of edge them out here in terms of at least what they're going for, that identity. I think the pillars in place are potentially better than they would have.
I guess the one thing that we haven't talked about, and I think kind of stands out to me, is just the goaltending outlook comparing the two teams. I think UPL and Levi have a much better outlook than Montebo and Primo. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in that area we definitely have the edge.
I don't think Montembeault gets enough credit for how he's played. I think he's been the backstop of a pretty bad Canadians team for a few years, and he's managed to keep his job through it. And Primo, I think Primo's been around for a few years too. I think they have a pretty. It's not flashy, but they have a solid goaltending duo. I think the Sabres have the higher ceiling and the lower floor when it comes to the goaltending here.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Montembeault, he's been pretty damn reliable for them the past two seasons. 22-23 at 16.78 goals saved above expected. This season he had 18.39. And Caden Primo, who he was in the negatives his first few seasons, but then this past season he was plus 8.9 in 23 games. So last season they were pretty reliable for them. Luukkonen had the better season this year compared to Montembeault. But Levi was basically on the same level as Primo. I think they honestly kind of cancel each other out, I think. I don't think there's really a distinct better or worse tandem on paper. I think Luukkonen and Montembeault are basically on the same level, and I think it really, if you want to edge one goaltending tandem over another, it depends on what you think of Levi, how good he's going to be, or maybe even if you think Reimer is going to be the Sabres guy backing up heading into next season.
Skipped right over the defense.
Yeah, I think like I was saying before, talking about their defense, they had some room to clear, and getting rid of Kovacevic and Jordan Harris, it kind of frees things up, gives Lane Hudson a spot. I think it's honestly kind of very similar to how I don't want to say very similar to the Senators, but I think that group is missing a Rasmus Dahlin, and I would even go as far as to say an Owen Power, but Yoki Haru and Clifton, I think the lows on the Sabres group I think they're lower than anybody that the Canadians have.
Yeah, again, it's a lot of this all ties. It's kind of funny, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but this all ties into like the cap situation we're in right now, or the low floor, high ceiling talk we're having right now. This all stems from banking on guys that maybe need to take another step forward this year, and it's so risky that you just don't know if you're going to meet expectations again, and then what happens after that. I feel like other teams, they have more of a foundational, floor to where they're probably not going to drop below unless they just absolutely bottom out. But it's going to be a wild ride if the Sabres just can't find a way to piece it together.
It's going to be very upsetting. I talk about these two groups, and I think on paper, like they're closer than they should be. I think the Sabres, I think they beat them out purely because of they have a Dahlin, they have a Power, and they maybe even have a Bowen Byram. I think if all goes well, and they should have the stronger defensive group, but that forward group for the Canadians, like their top six could outscore the Sabres' top six, and that goaltending tandem has been reliable. So it's like you shouldn't be. This is a conversation. This is kind of the negative connotation we've had about the Sabres. On our normal episodes, they didn't get so much better. Like this is a conversation. Like the past few seasons, if there is one team that has been the eighth ranked, if there's one team that has been the worst team in the Atlantic, it's been the Canadiens. You've known that going in, and that's how those seasons have finished up. They've always finished in eighth since their rebuild started. They might leapfrog a few teams this season. Honestly, I think when we get to the Red Wings, like I think I'll find more flaws in the Red Wings roster than I will in the Canadiens. They certainly don't have as much upside. So I don't think the Canadians are quite ready for a playoff push yet, but this is a lineup that can have 80, 85 points and stay in that race till the end of the year. The gap has shortened this offseason, especially if Kirby Dach stays healthy. Alex Newhook takes a step, and that top line of Slavkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield keep producing. Like, this could be close. It really could be.
Do you think the Senators are closer or the Canadians are closer?
Oof, that's a good question. Um,
'Cause
I
it
think
seems like we're giving it seems like we're giving the Canadians more flowers than we were the Senators last episode.
I think with the Canadians, I think it's like the way we talked about their top six. Like, it's exciting. Is it
Mhm.
going to work though? Who knows? Maybe Slavkovsky regresses this season. Suzuki had a career year last year. Maybe he takes a step back. Maybe Kirby Dach gets hurt again. Maybe Alex Newhook doesn't put it together. He wasn't great last season. You're kind of projecting that he takes a step this year. Maybe Lane Hudson has a really, really rough rookie ride. A lot of these things can happen, and goalies are voodoo. Montembeau and Primu could be one of the worst tandems in hockey. You never know. So, I think I would still take. I think Ottawa has a lot more sure bets than Montreal. I think, just thinking off the top of my head, I think they're a bit more sure.
I was going to say, I feel like we at least know more about them. And I think the reason we haven't talked them up as much is just because they've had higher expectations in the past, and they still do compared to the Canadians who are trying to make a name for themselves.
So after kind of walking all through that, I think I'm kind of on that train of thought where if things go right, if everything fits into place for this team, like, yeah, they can be in the race. And like, I'll probably never say they're going to make it, but if they did, would it completely shock me? Like, it would surprise me, but would it shock me? I don't think so. They have it in them. It's like the 22-23 Sabres where, everything just kind of has to go right. People have to have career years, take unexpected steps. But I think they can do it. I don't think they come in last this year in the Atlantic.
No. I think almost other than like a small handful of teams, I really think any team has the capability to make that jump, just be like a Cinderella story. And the Canadians definitely have the horses, and I think you're completely right. It's kind of like that unknown taking a step Sabres 22-23 season, and maybe if they play a little defense unlike we did that season, they'll and avoid an 8-game losing streak. They
And
can
get a
make
save or
a
two.
name. Oh yeah, and get a save. Like, please, for the love of God.
I think it's as simple as um, it's like a rear view mirror. Images are closer than expected. I think that the Canadians are a lot better than we all want to admit, and that they could soon be at our level or even better, depending on how the trajectories of our franchises go.
Yeah, what a high bar. Think it's the Sabres level.
If they, if they were to leapfrog the Sabres this year, whew, like, that's just a bad look, man. Like, I don't want to say you had a head start on this team,
You
but
had a head
you
start on this
basically,
team.
or like you were ahead of them. Like, you basically started your rebuild at the same time, but you took a bigger step early. And if they passed you this season, you floundered. You didn't go all in with your core, and now there's another team in the division that's might be ready to take a step. I think this is an interesting year to do this series. Kind of looking at all these teams, this could be a good division. I was saying, like, this team might not have a bottom feeder team. I think my hot take might be that the Red Wings might be that team, but even then, I don't think they're going to be as bad as the Canadians were these past few seasons. I think the lowest point total in this division might be like 75, 76 points. Everybody else, I think, is going to be in the 80s range or higher.
Very realistic expectations, especially with the top four being, consistently winners, and then the bottom four, they're all very far along in their rebuild, so all of them should have, expectation to, make a push for a playoff spot. So this could be very competitive. Those divisional games this year are going to be extremely valuable to take.
So we didn't do this with Ottawa, but I think I'll start it now. Give me your point and standings projection. Where's this team going to finish, and how many points are they going to have? Just for fun. I'll start it. I project 83 points for this roster. Think they'll still come in seventh, but the gap between 7, 6, and 5 is going to be close.
I was going to say they were going to finish with 86 points, and they'll finish in sixth.
I'm thinking seventh and 79 points.
Now I got to keep track. Of all the teams, because I'm going to say when we record the Detroit episode, I'm going to say, sixth. Like, no, Christian, you already said sixth. You know what?
Then when you do the written version of your Atlantic projections, you're like, what did I say in that friggin' what did Jonah make me say on the spot 2 months ago?
I gotta go back and study the tape.
That dumbass put me on the spot.
I'm already kind of regretting saying sixth.
I don't hate that. Like I really don't.
I'll stick with it.
I think the conversation is uncomfortable. It's like, who do they leapfrog? And it's like, dude, unfortunately, the Sabres are no sure bet, even though they should be. They're really not.
I'll stick with 6.
Last episode was fun talking about the Senators and kind of crapping on them. This episode has not been fun because it's made me realize, like, oh my God, like
it's all about framing though, because it's like with the Senators,
reality check.
With the Senators, you've been in the same tier. You know what to expect. You can laugh at them a little bit because even if they're better than you, you could argue they should be. Montreal, like, no, you should be better than this team. So if you don't finish ahead of them, that's a bad look.
That's fair.
So I think that's going to do it for this installment of Sabres versus the Atlantic. Next week, I do think we'll go into the Yzer plan a little bit, dig deep into that. So thank you for listening or watching this episode. We'll see you guys next time. Go Sabres.
Go Sabres.
Go Sabres.